Today, I'm going to give you my first impressions on the legendary tier light Pan Asian cruiser Jinan, which was just added to the game for the February 2025 update as a bureau project. And I would highly recommend grinding it because I think the ship is both very fun to play and also, in some cases, monstrously effective. I called the Sejong, I think at least twice, one of the most toxic ships in the game to try to push into, mostly due to its tremendous torpedo power. And the Jinan takes that to the next level. It very much is the successor to the Sejong, and it's much like it, except improved in pretty much every way, starting with the HP pool. Here we have 39,900 compared to, I think, the low 30k range on Sejong, so a little bit of extra HP. We've also got, I think, the same number of main battery guns as the Sejong. There are 5 double turrets of 127mm guns. Looks kind of like there would be 6, but you see on the back of the ship that turret closest to the rear tower. That looks like a main battery turret, but it's actually a secondary or an AA mount. So we've only got 10 127mm guns. They have a range of 15.1 kilometers, and I believe that's base, unmodified by any commander skills. I don't really see any point into building into the range on these things. You're really not going to be hitting anything except maybe a stationary battleship in excess of 15.1 kilometers. This thing sort of looks like an Atlanta, and the shells are very floaty, much like American cruiser shells and Atlantis shells specifically. They probably have a little bit better velocity than the actual Atlanta itself does, but they're not going to be very easy to hit anything at long ranges. So 15.1 kilometers is fine. They've got a reload time of 3.1 seconds, and I don't think we've spec'd into that at all. I suppose you could use main battery reload mod. Well, actually, you know what? I am using main battery reload mod, so that's with that module active. They do 1800 maximum HE shell damage with a 9% fire chance, which is pretty good. They do light a lot of fires. And the maximum AP shell damage is 2100. But as you can see, the torpedoes are the main draw here. This thing has 4 torpedo launchers, each one with 5 torps, so they're quintuple torpedo launchers. It's got 2 on either side, so you do have to spin around to get all of them in the water at one time. But with both sets of torpedoes in the water in one go, that's 20 torpedoes that you've sent downrange. And of course, we have the torpedo reload booster. So you can reacquire them instantly by using that thing up to 4 times a match with fully packed. At base, I think you only get 2, or maybe you get 3. Can't exactly remember, but the Pan-Asian Cruiser Commander, Chen, he's got a skill that gives you an extra torpedo reload booster, and of course he's got fully packed. So it is 2 without that commander on there, but you can get up to 4. And that allows you to put double then 20 torpedoes into the water at one time, so 40 torpedoes. If you're able to launch 40 torpedoes down a flank, well, good luck to the ships trying to push down that flank, right? Of course, that being said, our initial salvo of 40 torpedoes doesn't yield any results. We don't get a single hit. But don't worry, those hits are going to be coming. And of course, you can see us farming here on the Colombo. The damage from these guns is pretty nice when it hits surfaces of armor that they can pen. And they do light quite a bit of fires. I think we've got 2 so far, and we've only landed 32 shells. So if that's any kind of indication on how good the fire chance is. Anyway, back to the torpedoes. They have a range of 14.6 kilometers, which I think is somewhat modified by Chen's skill tree. I think there's at least one skill in there that increases the torpedo range, so it might be more like 13.5 kilometers base. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure, but either way, they're very long range. They reload in 110 seconds. They do 19,124 damage maximum when they hit, so they're almost on the level of IJN torpedoes. But unlike IJN torpedoes, which do hit really hard, IJN torpedoes are very, very conspicuous. I think most of the time you can see them at ranges starting around 1.7 kilometers. which, of course, gives the target plenty of time. Well, maybe not plenty of time, but a healthy amount of time to react. These torpedoes, on the other hand, are the trademark Pan-Asian deepwater torpedoes. So they have a detectability range of 0.8 kilometers. You just will not see them until they're right on your forehead, and then they'll smash you. However, they can only hit battleships, cruisers, and aircraft carriers. And that's probably common knowledge at this point, but I see enough people playing the Pan-Asian destroyers, which also have deep water torpedoes, intentionally trying to torpedo other destroyers, and so I feel like that needs to be highlighted at every available opportunity. The torpedoes go at 69 knots in the water, so they're pretty fast, and of course that's a nice number. We're able to take out that Colombo there with a flooding. And as you can see, we've got 3 torpedo hits and 3 floods, so the flooding chance here is pretty good too. As for the AA defenses, they're probably pretty good, but in the 5 or 6 games I've played in this ship thus far, I have not encountered an aircraft carrier yet to actually test them out. But it's got an aggregate AA defense rating of 96 for whatever that number is worth. Probably not a lot, but I'm sure this thing can shoot down planes if it comes down to that. Maneuverability characteristics on the ship are okay. It's not the fastest cruiser you've ever seen with a top speed of 35 knots, but it does have a 670-meter turning circle and a 7.7 second rudder shift. And then the concealment is another highlight here. We've got 8.9 kilometers of detectability, but that's because we're using the concealment mod. And on the Pan-Asian Cruiser Commander, we've got Mikawa and Swirsky as inspirations. Plus, in his second row of skills, Chen for the Pan-Asian line has a skill called Blind Justice, which increases the torpedo range and also decreases cruiser detectability. So with this kind of stealth, we're sort of like an oversized destroyer, an oversized torpedo boat destroyer at that, but with a citadel. And speaking of the citadel, we should probably talk about the armor a little bit. It does have some armor, actually, believe it or not. But the bow, the stern, and the deck armor, all of these are 16 millimeters, which can be overmatched by every single battleship you're going to encounter, and can even be overmatched by a healthy amount of cruisers that you're likely to encounter at Legendary Tier. In order to calculate the caliber of shell that can overmatch your armor scheme, you take the armor in millimeters, in this case 16, and then you multiply that by the magic number of 14.3. You get 228.8. So anything with 228 millimeter guns or larger can overmatch 16 millimeters of armor. And there's at least 2 cruisers in this match who fit that description, HMS Defense and USS Alaska. We haven't seen them yet, but they are here. Of course, the smoke screens, too. You can see we've launched one there in order to conceal ourselves from that Conqueror. Of course, the Gearing spotted us momentarily, so we had to take him out so that we could go dark, which we still aren't for some reason. I'm not sure why exactly. Could be the smoke firing penalty, perhaps, now that I look back on this. What is the smoke firing penalty? Let's pause here and just take a look. The detectability while firing in smoke for the Jinan, 6.2 kilometers. So that may be why the Colombo was spotting us there. I think we were closer than that. Anyway, it has the smoke screens. They are the Pan-Asian smokes. And as such, I think they're some of the best smoke screens in the game, next to the short burst British ones. The reason I say that is because the smoke screen disperses for 30 seconds, so you can create a reasonably big cloud of it. And then the smoke screen lasts, after it's been dispersed, for 70 seconds, and then 126 seconds for the cooldown. So that means if you're able to deploy one of these smokes and sit in it for the full duration, then by the time it completely fades, you'll have another smoke screen ready to go in about 60 seconds or so. That is not true of pretty much any other smoke screen in this game. pretty much every other one does take a little bit longer than that to come off cooldown after it has dissipated. And so that offers you the ability to be very versatile and position all around the map, taking your mobile concealment with you. And then, of course, we do have a repair party that can be switched out for the DFAA consumable, but I don't know why you would ever do that. The heal is going to be infinitely more useful than the DFAA consumable. It's not any kind of specialized heal, of course. It's right in line with, I think, the typical cruiser, restoring 199 HP per second and lasting for 28. And then the torpedo reload booster. We've only got 2 of them base, but Chen has a special skill that gives you an extra, and he's got fully packed, so you can get up to 4. And that is what allows you to double the torpedo output from 20 torpedoes, which is already a lot, to 40. And as such, I think the Jinan, much like the Sejong, is the kind of ship that excels in stopping a flank. If you put this thing on a flank like we did in the beginning of this match, nobody is going to want to push into it. At least no battleship or cruiser, because pushing into up to 40 deep water torpedoes that you cannot see, unless you've got sonar, I suppose, but pushing into 40 torpedoes that you cannot see until they hit you right into the face, not going to be a fun time. This thing is very dangerous on a flank. It can absolutely demolish an entire flank, probably all by itself, given the opportunity, especially in a match like this, where those 2 Columbos that we were fighting, and then the Conqueror later on, I believe all 3 of them were division together. Triple battleship divisions, in my opinion, are not good compositions for divisions. If you're a triple battleship division trying to fight one single Jinan, you might lose. You need something like a cruiser or a destroyer to be able to spot the Jinan for you. Of course, even if you do that, then it can smoke up, so you might want radar assistance as well. But you need something to be able to spot the Jinan. It's just too stealthy. You're never going to spot it yourself in a battleship, and with 20 torpedoes it can put out in one go, and then doubling that to 40 with the reload booster, trying to push into that could be next to impossible. You're just going to get wrecked by the torpedoes if you attempt it. And so the thing is excellent when holding down a flank. But the reason I wanted to show you this match, which again was the very first one I played, is because I think this is representative of both the ship's strengths and the weakness. The strengths we've seen. We saw that the ships were pushing down the flank and they got hit for quite a bit of damage by torpedoes. We've only got 6 hits, but believe me, if you get a flank that's full of more ships, you can get more than that. We got a nice number of floods, couple shell hits, nice number of fires. This thing is basically a anti-pushing ship. You put it somewhere on the map where the enemy is pushing, and you stop the push. Now, on the other hand, you might find yourself in a scenario with 2 minutes left to go in a match where your opponents are an Alaska, a Defense, and then a Khabarovsk. The Alaska and the Defense, both of them can overmatch our armor plating on the bow and the stern and the deck. We do have 32 millimeter side armor, which we could theoretically angle against the shells, but Alaska's got improved pen angles, American ones, and so that might be kind of tricky. The Citadel, likewise, is exposed. It does sit above the water, and the hull is very thin, so if you put this thing broadside to battleships, I found that the no armor equals best armor cliche does hold true. You'll get overpen from time to time. You'll probably get devstruck from time to time, too. It'll be a bit of a crapshoot, probably not something you should totally rely on, but you could theoretically go broadside to a battleship and be okay for a salvo or 2, just getting overpen damage. But against an Alaska or Defense, which do have big guns, big enough to overmatch a lot of our armor scheme, but smaller guns than a battleship, I think we would get citadeled and die. And of course, there's both the Defense and the Alaska. They're going to shoot at us. One of them is going to overmatch our bow and take off a little chunk of HP. We can heal most of it back, so that's fine. But there's no time left to go in this match. And I was thinking, wow, maybe there's enough time to get these torpedoes on target. It says about 35 seconds. And by the time we launched them, there were only about 21 seconds left to go in this match, so I think we launched them a bit too late, and unfortunately, they're not going to make contact with the Alaska. In retrospect, I suppose I could have aggressively pushed into the two of them, but I think I would have sunk. They would have both shot me at the same time. We've only got 24,000 HP, and I think if we sunk, of course, we would have lost the same as the result that we see now. This was a defeat. Bit unfortunate for my very first match in the Jinan. However, I think it demonstrates both the strengths and the weakness of the ship. Bottom line is, you want things to be pushing into you. You don't want to have to push into other things. And if you can find things that'll push into you, you're going to have a really fun time in this thing. I think it's well worth grinding the Bureau project, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.